All right, sweet. So here's recording. Uh, let's see. Screen one. So just a extremely brief overview of installing a VM. So you're gonna pop open well, the one we like to stick with is Kali. Uh right? Kali Linux because it has a wait, why do I have this open? Has a lot of built-in hacking tools, right? So here's my VM right here, right? I'm on my VM right now. I'm gonna go back to my host machine. So to download Kali, all you're really going to have to do is oh my God, my computer's lagging. Just click the download button on the website, and you have the options between images or VMs. We're gonna stick with VMs. So you go to the download. I'm pretty sure if you just type download Kali, uh, it'll like automatically link you to here. Then you just hit the VMs because we're probably sticking with VMs. Now, depending on what hypervisor or virtual machine manager you have, right? It's going to be either VMware or VirtualBox. I like to stick with VMware, but VirtualBox works just as fine. I used to have a VirtualBox VM, and then I kind of blew it up on accident. So once you go to the downloads page, whatever provider you're using, just download the right whichever one, and then it's gonna come in a 7-zip file. I don't know if I still have it, but it's gonna come in like a zip file basically, and then all you have to do is from your virtual machine manager, you could just click open, and then you could look for it and basically load it into it, and it will just work. Actually, no, I think you click new. You go to file new, either that or no, never mind, I'm wrong. You just probably click open. It's been a bit. That's if you're installing it like this. If you want to image it yourself, which takes a little extra steps, you could download the ISO over here, and then from there you would hit new virtual machine, and then you would do like custom, I don't know. Then you would find the ISO that you downloaded. I don't know if I have it. Oh, I happen to have a Kali ISO on me. Then you would just like go over here, new virtual machine, uh, installing Linux. Kali is a subset of Debian or like a modified Debian, so you just go with Debian and then blah blah blah. Kind of click change a few of the hardware specifications. I don't actually know too much about hardware, so I like to keep it like 2 and 2. I don't know if that's good or bad. 4,000 gigabytes of RAM or 4 gigabytes of RAM is usually like the minimal amount for Kali-ish, and then just default, just go through with it. The only thing you really need to configure is the RAM, the CPU, and the hard drive space. You might want to give it like a little more than 20 because Kali does eat up a bit of stuff since it has a lot of tools in it. You kind of just like go, and then you finish. Except I already have it, so I'm not gonna finish. Then once you're done with that, you should easily have a VM up and running. It's a similar thing for VirtualBox too, but yeah, it's just download a file, shove it into the thing, uh, configure the hardware if you're doing from an ISO, or just load it in if you're downloading it from whatever this format is called. There's like 2 formats for each one. It's weird. Anyways, so that's how you get Kali VM set up. So then you could do a lot of that fun pen testing stuff. Kali's nice because you get a lot of tools, and a lot of things are sort of oriented around using Kali. So as for now, not too sure what we want to be looking into right now. If we all want to stick with the starting point labs, or if we want to try to take on a box right now. It's let's see, hack the box. Like the website that we are usually doing things on, it's hack the box. It's just like hackthebox.com. If you first result when you Google it. Mm, they spin up a lot of VMs for us, and for starting off, there's something they have called the Starting Point Labs that have a lot of introductory VMs that sort of help you build up some little bit of fundamentals here and there. you have to register for an account, and then to connect to the actual boxes, you'll just go to the, well, for starting point, you could go down to the machines, and then it's gonna say connect, and it's gonna allow you to download a VPN profile, and then you could connect to the VPN, and then you can hit the box once it's turned on. Uh, we've already gone through a few of them, so if anybody wants to review them, or unless you guys don't want to do Hack the Box, we could also go over to Try Hack Me, which is also pretty fun. Uh, you guys, let's see, which one do you guys want to be doing right now? Uh, any preference or?
I'm completely new for one, so I don't know what the previous ones were.
Oh, okay. So I'll just give like a quick review because like previous ones were sort of there wasn't too much content involved in them, so I'll just go like I'll just summarize this because we've gotten over the all of tier 0, and basically what we covered was there are uh services that run on computers, and to do this, the to communicate on a network level, these computers have ports. Your computer has ports. I can actually bring up my ports on my computer if I just do something like this, as an example. These are all my ports that are listening for connections. It's indicated by the number after the colon. So applications on your computer that will communicate with other computers, such as, accessing the internet or playing games, they will utilize ports to either reach out or receive connections from other computers. And because ports are how computers communicate, they're essentially the attack surface for an attacker. If a computer is not able to receive connections on a network level, then we really can't do anything because as a pen tester, unless we're doing an in-person engagement, we're probably going to be attacking them over a network level. Now, with these services, a common term for them is like saying they are the computer the service runs on is what we like to call like the server, and the people connecting to it are like the clients. So if a server, let's say the server's hosting a website, and I'm connecting or accessing the website, just like how I'm accessing Hack the Box, then Hack the Box would be the server and I'm the client. So this whole tier 0 was just getting used to a lot of different services and how to use tools to client tools to interact with them. So, as an analogy, one of the most common servers you'll run into are web servers, just like how I'm on Hack the Box right now. And for web servers, one of the most common client tools for them is a web browser. You just open up your web browser, and then you go to the URL of the whatever website, and now you're accessing the web server. So that's an example. Uh, for these boxes, though, not they didn't have web servers. They had various services such as like file transfer servers, or in the case of Windows, something called SMB. But that's its own thing. Yeah, so we got used to working with them. Just some command line stuff. With pen testing, we'll be doing a lot of this from the command line. So
I'm not sure if I mean, I don't know, Ashley and Salvador, if you've seen the tier zeros. I haven't. Uh, is it okay if we go over that again?
Oh yeah, sure. I'll go over them. So, I'll start off by connecting to the VPN. So you just click the connect button. It's gonna try to download me a VPN. Uh, gonna take a bit of time. Yeah, okay, starting point. And then to actually work with to connect to the VPN, at least on Linux, since we're running on Kali Linux. Here, let me zoom in a bit. You type in the OpenVPN That's the sort of command you're gonna run, and then you're gonna do specify what's called a file path, which is basically where the file is located on the system. So Linux directory structure, if you're not familiar, starts with the root, which is just a slash. And then after that, there's like a bunch of other directories. Since I downloaded this as the Kali user, it's probably going to be in home Kali downloads folder. And I'll just have to look for, I could press tab to sort of auto complete it. So I'm pretty sure it's this one. So then here's OpenVPN, here's the path to the VPN. Just hit enter and I should be connected. So I'm gonna refresh the page. Wow, that's unlucky. It says it's a bit weird. Either that or I connected to the wrong VPN. See, no, it should be starting point. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Hmm. Well, worst case, I have like 5 VPNs from starting point, so maybe I'll just go for this one, see if this one works. I have no idea. I lost track. I kept pressing the download button. I don't know if that affects anything. Keep refreshing the page until I see green. Oh, okay. I guess I was using the wrong VPN profile, I guess, or something. So now that I'm connected to the VPN by running the OpenVPN, uh, last time I specified an absolute path, but you can also, if the file is in your same directory, you could just, or the same folder you're in, essentially, I'm in the home Kali folder. Uh, you could just specify the name of the file if it's within your within the directory you're already in. So just that's what I did over here. Now I could spawn the machine. So this first machine is called, I don't know why it's called yeah, but that's what it is. There are a few questions that Hack the Box will make you sort of run through. I think some of them are pretty helpful and other ones are a bit annoying to get through, but that's just what it is. VM takes a bit of time to spin up. While that spins up though, I think even if you don't have a VM, you could still answer these questions if you want to try to like progress along after you sign up for an account and go to the starting point labs. Pretty sure you can still answer these questions, so if you guys want to follow along, that works. But yeah, we already covered what VM stands for if anyone wants to say it again, essentially. Uh, yeah, it just stands for virtual machine, so I know we had that part covered. Now, the tool that we use to interact with the operating system, essentially like this thing, this command line. Does anyone know what like another term for it is? Uh, Another term for the command line is just like a terminal, because actually I don't know why it's called a terminal. Just kind of exists, I guess. But a lot of people will sort of call this command line the shell or the terminal. It's all sort of the similar thing. Just see it says terminal there. Does anyone run like the service or the command that I was running so then I could actually VPN into the uh or the command or the service I was using to connect to the VPN, so now I can hit this box or this IP address.
That one was OpenVPN, right?
Yeah, I was running OpenVPN. So that's OpenVPN. So, and one way I could actually test is this isn't completely foolproof, but one way you could try to see if you can hit something is you can also do this from Windows. It's they're the same commands on both Windows and Linux, but you just run the ping command and then you put the IP address of what you're trying to ping. So if it responds with like this, then you know you can hit like that IP address, you can actually communicate and you can communicate with it on the network. If I put like an arbitrary number, like here, I get no response because it either does, yeah, it's not reachable because it either doesn't exist or I am not able to communicate it on a network flow for whatever reason. Sometimes though, if computer firewalls pings, then this would return like a false negative. So there is that. But if it does respond, then you can sort of confirm that there is some sort of network level access that you have to the computer that you're trying to hit. So does anyone actually know the name of something, what's called like a tunnel interface? So if I run the command IPA and if I, the equivalent on Windows is ipconfig, uh, yeah. If I do IPA, I get a bunch of this out, this output, like 1 LO, 2 ETH0, 3 Mythic IF. All of these are called like network interfaces, and they all have like represent my IP address on sort of a on another network because you could be connected to multiple networks, just like how this is my VM network, and these are their own things. If I were if when I run ipconfig on my Windows machine, I can see I also have a lot of network interfaces too from whatever network adapters are on my computer. Does anybody know the name for like the tunnel interface? Oh, it's just gonna be ton, and then usually the number sort of indicates like from my experience, like if I'm connected to one VPN, then that first VPN I connected to is like ton zero. If I connect to another one, it's like ton one, ton two, ton three. I don't exactly know the reason for that naming convention. It just kind of exists. So the abbreviated name for a tunnel interface is just ton. Okay. Does anyone remember like what command or basically the tool that I was running to test if I could connect to a computer via something called ICMP, which is just a network protocol?
That one was ping.
Yeah, I was just pinging it. So that's just that. That's just pinging things. And okay, does anyone know how we could find open ports on our target? Because remember how I was talking about how ports are how computers communicate, but how can you actually find them on another machine, right? I showed how to find them on my machine, but how would I find them on a machine that I'm attacking? There is a command called nmap, which stands for network mapper. This is actually like from my experience, a pretty common tool. Like everybody uh eventually uses it at one point or another, and sometimes they use it very commonly. So I just run nmap and the IP address of who I want to hit. It'll take a bit of time because it's a port scanner and it's already done. But I can see here nmap is telling me that this computer has port 23 open. Now let's if I wanted to scan my host machine, I believe my host machine IP for this interface would be .1. If I were to run this, it would show me a lot more port. Yeah, so here it's actually now if I wanted to get more output, so an Nmap doesn't scan. There's 65,000 ports on TCP and UDP protocol. By default, Nmap only scans TCP and a few thousand of them. If I want to scan all of them, I could do this TAC flag. And if I want to also speed it up, I can do something called like min rate. And then I specify a number. I think 1000 is like the default. I don't really know. I like to put like 3000 or something. So now I'm going to run a full port scan on my host machine. And if if all goes well, it should look similar to this output over here. Although, let's see. So I'm gonna let that run for a bit.
May I ask what that other coding window is? You
Oh,
you said it was Windows?
oh yeah, the command prompt.
command prompt?
Yeah,
Is that something everybody has access to, or did you
yeah.
have to download that?
It's built into all Windows machines. It's also called cmd.exe. Um, you can actually also use PowerShell, which is a bit more powerful. I just like command prompt because I like command prompt. It's kind of it. Uh,
Oh, cool.
I wonder if I have a firewall on actually. I might have a firewall because I'm not seeing all the ports. So there's a chance that I have a firewall. Let me turn off my firewall real quick. And I'm just doing this for demonstration purposes. All right, turn that off. Oh wow. Okay. I don't
Okay,
actually know
and
what different profiles do on the firewall. Okay, we're gonna try that scan again. Uh, but yeah, Nmap stands for network mapper, and as you can see, it's scanning ports. Now that I turned off my firewall, yeah, there we go. There's a lot more output. So you can actually see that, okay, just like for a quick, note, this 0000 means that, this port is listening on all my network interfaces. So what that means is any computer that can communicate with me can hit this port basically. While some other ports, like this one on 139, only listens on a specific interface, so not everything can communicate with that port. This is like a little bit of a security measure, to my understanding. But I can see now that I tore down my firewall, I'm getting a lot more ports open. And all these ports that are listening on all my interfaces are showing up on my Nmap scan. So that 135 is there. I don't know why the 139 is there, but 445 is there, 902, 912, 5040, 53, 57, 5426, and so on and so forth. So Nmap is the way of base. You run Nmap and you'll find all the ports running on whatever machine you're targeting. And while we don't know how, while currently you might not know how to weaponize this information, just knowing that the ports are there gives you some options because for the most part, some things will commonly run on specific ports. So by identifying those and understanding how to attack those services, that gives you Nmap can help you see some opportunities on whatever host you're attacking. I'm gonna turn on my firewall back on because wanna I guess that's just good habit to have. But anyways, so yeah, Nmap is just how you scan for ports on a target. If I go back up to this was when I actually scanned the VM Hack the Box was hosting. I was just scanning my actual host machine for demonstration purposes, but this is actually what the output sort of brought up. Cool trick with Nmap is that you can actually get more output if you do the something called TAC SBC. That's a capital V and a capital C. That's gonna run scripts and check for service versions because sometimes you want to get more information on than on just what port is open. Sometimes you want to know maybe what's running on the port, or at least try to figure that out. And Nmap has that functionality. So by adding the TAC SBC flags, we can see a little bit more information, well, when the scan finishes. So I can see for that before it just said telnet. Uh, right? Now it says it's running Linux telnet. And while that's not super like that's not a lot more information. I mean, like assuming I knew nothing about my victim, at least I could tell myself, okay, well, based on this, I know it's a Linux machine. Uh, aside from that, I didn't get too much out of it, but sometimes there will be something helpful. It's a good practice to have just to try to get as much information as you can, especially from your scans. Okay. What service do we identify from port 23 during our scans? Well, I kind of gave that one away. So, I mean, I guess we could just say there you see it's Telnet, something called Telnet. Does anyone actually know what Telnet is? So, Telnet was, according to history, I only know this much about it, but it was essentially a way to remotely log into your computer from the command line. It did this all unencrypted though, so that's why more secure measures were eventually implemented because I'll actually demonstrate it. Here, let me pop open Wireshark real quick. So if I just pop that open, Wireshark, I'll let that run in the background and I'll tell it to listen on my VPN interface. So we'll just do that. Okay, but going back to Telnet, it was essentially a way to remotely log into a computer. Does anyone have an idea of how we might be able to do that though? How can we try attempt to, I guess, remotely log into this computer through Telnet? I mean, usually as a pen tester, like the majority of what you're going to be doing is troubleshooting and Googling stuff. So, one thing we could just do is like how to connect with Telnet. And it looks like all we got to do is do Telnet, the IP address of the Telnet server, and then the port. So Telnet, the IP address, and then the port is 23. And it's just gonna, I don't know if it takes a while or if it just like is blank sometimes. So I'll just give it a bit of time and see if anything happens. And I can see Wireshark is picking stuff up from Telnet connections. Oh, okay, yeah. Uh, so there's this, and it's asking for a login. I guess this goes into the next question, but apparently there is a user who is able to log in through Telnet with a blank password. Would anyone like to try to take a guess and figure who that might be? We do know that this is a Linux machine. Uh, so and I mean, yeah, that's sort of all the information we have. There is one user on Linux that always exists, and that is user ID 0 or the root user, which is basically Linux's admin user. All these other users are vary from system to system. So, oh, well, connection timed out. So one thing that's sometimes nice to try out for, just to get things out of the way is try to see if you can log in as the admin user or the root user or whatnot. It's not always like completely realistic that it'll work, but there are some times where people are very lazy with things. So if we just try to log in with the root user, oh, I put three O's on accident. We just, there we go. We're able to log in because somebody didn't put a password on the root user, which probably isn't really realistic at all, but it's just a little example of how you can actually log in with Telnet. Um, as I said, like the whole point of starting point tier 0 is just kind of getting used to the command line and getting used to interacting with services with a client tool. In this case, our client tool was Telnet. We actually look at the Wireshark data too that I left running. You can see that everything that I was sort of doing was completely happening all unencrypted over the wire. So back then, if anyone was using Telnet to log into their systems and dealing with sensitive data or putting in passwords somewhere, like I don't know, even just listing the file system or uh just, doing normal computer stuff, if anybody was doing that, if a malicious person was attack listening on the network, they could see what they were doing. I mean, the output looks a little janky, but for the most part, it's all relatively clear what the actual person was doing on, which is why Telnet is not really used as often anymore. But anyways, yeah, so we figured out the root user was able to log in with a blank password. And what Hack the Box and a lot of these websites work with is they do something called like a flag. A flag is like an objective that you can gain access to by reaching certain conditions. In this case, the root flag is usually a flag that's only accessible by the root user. So now it's just asking us to submit the root flag. I can also see that when I did my little listing over here, I found the flag on accident. Does anyone have an idea how we could read that flag and then submit it? Well, in Linux, to do that stuff, all you have to do is like you type in cat. That's how you read files on the Linux command. You do cat flag.txt. And from there, you can just copy it, submit it in here, and yeah, finish this one. So I'll just send it in chat. That's a little example of. So that would be like one of the machines. All the other machines are sort of similar in that regard to Meow, except for Fawn, it's rather than dealing with Telnet, it's accessing an FTP server, and Dancing, I believe it's accessing an SMB server or an SMB application. So they're all relatively similar. I'm gonna stop the machine now. Exit. Okay. Close Wireshark 2. Yeah. Do you guys want to continue going with uh this tier 0? Do you want to sort of like jump ahead a little to tier 1 and get into more exploitation stuff?
I mean, I'm down to see tier one, although uh, I was kind of hoping. Do you think you could explain if this is like, is this possible to follow along with just the command prompt on Windows,
So
or
the
is there
reason
like
why,
different codes?
yeah, so let's on Windows, you don't have an FTP. Oh wait, oh wow, I have an FTP client. Yo, I did not know that. That's crazy. Ah, oh, okay. I guess you have an FT. I didn't know you had an FTP client. That's pretty cool. But some other things like this, the box Redeemer works with Redis, and I'm very confident that Windows doesn't have Redis CLI, right? And for Windows, connecting to a VPN, you would have to download like a VPN client like OpenVPN and stuff. With on Linux and more in particular Kali, a lot of these tools come in built in, so it's a lot easier to work with them. If I was doing dancing, for example, and trying to interact with the SMP share, I'm used to doing that on the command line, but for Windows it would be different. So I will say that it's strongly recommended. No, yeah, I think you should just work with a Kali virtual machine for this stuff because trying to do it through Windows is just going to be a lot of a headache. Especially with coming into tier 1, a lot of these things start becoming you need to use the tools available on Kali.
Okay, got it. Then I need to make it a priority to get one.
Yeah, don't worry. And once you work with the what you call it, mm, w- once you have a Kali, you'll a lot of these online resources that sort of are built around learning pen testing, like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, they become a lot easier because well, they, all these websites sort of assume you're running on Kali because Kali is just kind of like the whole de facto pen testing VM thing. So it's just like it's a lot easier because they're built around it, so might as well just get a Kali. Uh, let's see. I will jump ahead to Responder because I think this box is pretty cool. For some stuff, it covers like a mix of what you call it, a mix of different sort of exploitation stuff. So I will start this one up. I won't go. I mean, I could go through the questions, but actually, yeah, why not? I'll just go through the questions as I go through this one. So knowing how they make you do all the boxes in basically a certain order, but I just kind of want to show this one off because this one has a lot of cool components in it. Yeah, wow, it's taking quite a time to spin up. Well, that spins up though. I'm just gonna pre-write an nmap scan. Well, I still need the IP address. Oh, there we go. So I'll just leave nmap running in the background for now. And apparently there's a web service running on this computer. To access a website, you can actually just type in HTTP and the IP address. Um, Now the thing is that IP addresses are just do you guys know about like DNS or have you heard of DNS and sort of know what it is?
Not mistaken, that's domain naming server or
Yeah, that is
something.
yeah, that's domain name service. So basically, rather than typing IP addresses in your URL bar, you could just type in the domain names. The domain names are actually have an associated IP address with them in something called a DNS server, which just makes it easier to access things online and for communication because rather than needing to deal with IP addresses, we could use names. If I actually run something called, I believe, NSLOOKUP, and I run it on, let's say, tryhackme.com, right? I can see there are, I think there's several. I'm not too familiar with DNS, so I'm not actually sure which one is TryHackMe, but it seems there are several. So if I try to hit HTTPS on this, oh, I'm just curious if any of them will work. Either that or there's some other fancy networking going on. Okay, yeah, it was worth a try, but in general, there's an IP address associated with the domain name, and through the power of networking magic, the two are able to work together. So I can see that when I try to hit this IP address in the URL bar, I got redirected to something called unica.htb. But my web browser wasn't able to find that. Does anyone have an idea of like a potential solution for that, or like or what this whole situation is? Like, does anyone know what the issue is? Yeah, that's what I should be asking. So when I accessed the IP address, I got redirected to a domain, right? Something called, or a domain name, something called unica.htb. But if unica.htb isn't resolved by my DNS server, so my computer doesn't figure out domain names by himself, it asks a server for them. It's like, do you know what the IP address of this domain name is so I can, ask so I can talk to it. But if none of the DNS servers that my computer communicates with has this particular domain name, essentially what the term is resolved. If none of them are able to resolve it to an IP address, then what do I do? what? The scan did not get anything, seriously? That's crazy. Scan again. But what I could essentially do is both Windows and Linux have this. Okay, there we go. Let me just now run a full port scan just to see everything available. There's something called Etsy hosts on Kali, and on Windows it's called Windows System 32 drivers Etsy. Okay, yeah. I don't know why I remember that, but on Windows it's called Windows System 32 drivers Etsy hosts. On Linux it's just called Etsy hosts. And Etsy hosts is just a place where you can put additional DNS entries for your computer essentially. So I know this IP address is redirecting me to unica.htb. So if I put an entry for unica.htb as that IP address, can refresh, and now my web browser is able to essentially resolve the two, and now I'm able to access the website. Um, a lot of times when you're attacking a like a network and all like an internal network and they all are using like domain names, if you're not able to sort of resolve the IP addresses of the machines or know which machines you're targeting, it could be a bit difficult to sort of operate in that environment. So let's see. Yeah, so the domain that we were redirected to was unica.htb. Let me see. So now that we're on the website, let's see, http unica.htb, just a website, I guess. Nothing too interesting about it. Uh, let's see. Looks like you could change the language on the page. So I guess there's that. Now it's just French. Does anybody have any idea what the potential script backend scripting language to being run on the server is? A lot of websites don't just use HTML and CSS. They have like a backend language that they use to sort of help them do some actions and stuff. So does anybody know which backend language this website might be using? For some websites, or for some web servers, you can, this is sort of indicated by the file extensions that of the pages in the URL. I believe this one's doing like PHP, and PHP is actually a backend language. I think Cal Poly uses something called ASPX and also JSP, because I do recall seeing those extensions on some of their web pages. So the answer to this one would just be PHP. Uh, yeah, so we know this website based on just looking around. This computer's running a web server. This web server is running a PHP website, so there's some sort of PHP backend going on over here. Okay, so the next question saying, what is the name of the URL parameter that loads different language versions of the web page? Different language. Okay, yeah. So like it looks like does anyone know what that question is talking about? It says there's a URL parameter that loads different language versions of the web page. So in the URL, you can pass what are called like parameters to uh the web the web page, or to you could pass parameters through the URL, and sometimes the backend page will interpret them to do something. If I go to YouTube, for example, YouTube has parameters on their videos too. I can see that. Let's just say I go on this guy's YouTube video real quick. Looks like there's an ad. I can see there's a parameter up here called V. I'm assuming that's like a video ID. But you can also, for YouTubers, you can pass in an additional parameter called T, which is for the timestamp. In this case, the website on the VM is running a parameter called page, and page has the value of some the text German.html. And it looks like if I just change this between whatever language it's running, it will just sort of change language to that. So if it does German, I wonder if it is an equivalent for English. Guess there is an equivalent for English. They have English, French, and German. And the page parameter is page. Now, when a website pulls up pages through essentially user input, this parameter is something that the user has control over. Does anyone have an idea what potential vulnerabilities may exist in there from that? Because I can sort of control what, or at least I have a degree of control of what page I want to load. If I want to do page, I could put English or I could put German.html. It seems, and then the page loads that page. Does anyone see like a potential danger that can happen from this if it's not coded properly, or whoever made this, if they didn't program it properly?
I mean, does it allow you to upload your own pages custom
Well,
and you could put that up?
I don't see an upload page, right? All I know is that I can sort of just pull pages that are on the web server, right? So if I can pull pages on the web server, are we familiar with how sort of web servers, or at least like basic web servers sort of work?
Uh, I know that my troop webmaster ran me through how it's how a website works. I'm not quite sure if that's the same thing.
I think it might be similar, but for the most part, at least at least like simple web servers like Apache and Nginx, what they do is, let me just start a server up, right? And let me just, the, they essentially serve files on your computer and make them accessible through the web server, right? So if I go to, so in the case of Apache on Linux, the default web root is var www HTML, right? So if I go to localhost 80, I go to the index page. Whoops, why did that die? It's kind of weird. XCP 27001 index.html. I wonder if something happened to my Apache. Give me a second. Using server name directive. Oops. Looks like my Apache might have been a little borked. var www HTML. Fits that. Yeah, that's weird. Okay, and I do this. Oh, it's because my Apache's not running on port 80. What? I kind of messed that up for some reason. I put on 801. That's weird. Localhost. Okay, so if I go to localhost 801, I can see this is the index page. And I can also see that in my web root, there's something called index.html. If I make a new file called bro.html, and I just say, just write bro in there. If I go to localhost 801, type in bro.html, and I could see there's the page that I just made, bruh. So at least basic web servers that don't have too much complex functionality in them, they just essentially serve files and make them accessible over the web. So that's similar to what this thing is doing, except I'm noticing that they have a parameter that allows me to sort of like indicate which page I get to pull up on the website. So German pulls up the German HTML. English seems to pull up the English HTML, right? Does anyone think does anyone have any idea what I could potentially do with this? So I have like some control over the files that I can read. Well, one thing I could try if this is a relatively common-ish vulnerability that results from people basically not just they just didn't code the website very securely. So if I do ls on my computer, and I can also do this here. If I type in dir on my command prompt, right? I see everything. If I do ls dot dot, that goes one directory above, right? I want from being HTML into www. If I do ls, it goes up two. So theoretically, what if I could just pull, like, go I don't know how far it is to the top. If I just go all the way to the top, oops, it'll just like keep me at the root, so there's not too much drawback there. So I'll just like go up a bunch. Oops. Right? And what if I just right, because in Linux, like there's a file called etc hosts, right? What if I just try to pull up the etc hosts file? Looks like the page sort of died. And based on the error message that I failed to open this path, no such file or directory. This is usually a Windows thing. Linux doesn't really have this whole like hard drive or like drive name sort of format. So I'm actually on the Windows machine. So I'm gonna try to pull up the Windows one. So Windows System 32 drivers etc hosts. And we can actually look at files on the system. Now we don't know what files are exactly on the system, but some files are always going to be there. So it's like using files like etc hosts is like one potential way just to check if something is vulnerable to something. So it looks like this website is vulnerable to what's called file inclusion, or since this is inclusion on, we can read files on the host machine, this would be called local file inclusion. Is that this thing? Which of the following values for the page will be? Oh wow, so it is. Okay. Well, I mean, I kind of just like covered this one on accident. It's kind of this one. They also kind of give it away with all these dot dots, and this answer is the only one with the dot dot, whatever. Let's see. However, this isn't the only thing that's a potential danger with this. So it looks like we can include files through, essentially traversing the file system through the parameter and then pulling a file to read. However, sometimes there's something called remote file inclusion too. Does anyone have an idea of how we might want to essentially test to see if that's a possibility here? So local file inclusion, we just put essentially a file path, right? Something on the local system. However, for remote file inclusion, we can try putting a URL to a remote file. So I'm just gonna put like https google.com. I want to see if it can load, I don't know, like the Google web page. can see that also didn't work because it says the HTTPS wrapper is disabled, so they don't allow pulling files through URL. But there might be some other things that we can try out too. Uh, let's see. So this is a Windows machine, and I'm not sure if I don't think everybody was here when I went over it, but is there any potential Windows thing that I can some sort of Windows application that I could sort of utilize to test out another form of remote file inclusion? So on one hand, I can try out to I can try to utilize the URL. That's one form of remote file inclusion. If I actually look for remote file inclusion, I'm pretty sure there are let's see. Wolf Windows. Just look around. There are some resources that say this was doing something I was trying to do. I tried to pull up a file from a remote system, but if I look around, it looks like on top of just hosting a file system, even or on top of just hosting a file on a web server, something I can try to utilize is something called Samba or SMB. So if I were to make a test file, and I'm just gonna type in some PHP text that I can think of on the spot, and if I set up a SMB server with this command, I'll copy and paste in the chat if anyone wants to take a look into this command. If I run an SMB server with this and I check my IP address, so with a web server, to pull files from the web, you put HTTPS or HTTP colon slash slash whatever. For SMB, you put actually no, I think you do two forward slashes, the IP address or the server name, the share name, which I named share, and then the file name, test.php. If I run this, oops, I'm just gonna close this, getting annoying. I can see it says bruh. So cd var HTML. I pulled the test PHP file from my SMB share that I hosted with that command, and the test PHP file runs PHP code that says bruh. So we actually do have a form of something called remote file inclusion. So on top of just being able to read files locally, we can read files on the system. Or no, I said that in reverse. On top of being able to read files locally, we can pull files remotely and have them execute code on the server. PHP is a server-side like coding scripting language thing as they said over here. So by creating a PHP file that runs some code, and then they try to pull that file up, the code actually executes on their system. So if I were to, PHP can even run something called system commands, or basically they can run commands on the system, right? So if I put this PHP code that runs the command host name, and I refresh this and try this again, I can see the host name of the machine is responder, right? Because this thing says responder. We can execute code on this machine through remote file inclusion, which is usually very dangerous because this is completely, an attacker could just put the URL of a malicious file, and then the server is going to run it, read it, and then run it on themselves, which is not good. But there's another thing too. It's also the other danger involved here is that because the computer is accessing files through SMB, SMB is weird and likes to authenticate for some reason. Uh, it'll automatically try to authenticate to the SMB server that it's accessing. In this case, this is my SMB server. So I can actually see that I can see is like there's an authentication message, they authenticated, and there's this weird text. Does anyone have any idea what this might be? All this like garbage essentially. Well, it looks like garbage. It's a password hash. It's actually just a password hash. Uh, SMB does authentication through something called NTLM, uh, which is basically just Windows stuff. Now, because I put my SMB share, it tried to authenticate into it and then and grab the file that I had on my SMB share. And in doing so, it tossed some authentication stuff my way. So I could actually crack this hash, or at least try, using a tool called Hashcat. Uh, so I'm just gonna run, oops, I'm just gonna run this command. Hashcat is a tool to crack hashes, and it can try to auto detect hashes. In this case, I have to specify the mode because it got confused that there might be two different types of hash. So I'm gonna try the first one. So I'm gonna run this command, and it ran instantly. But Hashcat was able to grab the hash from this the SMB share, so and then it was able to crack it. So by having remote file inclusion on top of essentially being able to run commands on their computer, I was also able to grab a password hash that was crackable due to them having a weak password, which is, to say the least, kind of bad on their part for having a weak password. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot going on here because an improperly coded website allowed an attacker to read local and remote files. By reading remote files, the attacker is able to gain both code execution and they're actually able to even attempt to steal password stuff. Now, we have two things that we have a password, so we'd like to log in. At least that would be nice if we could log in. Uh, does anyone have an idea of how we could try to log in with the password that we grabbed? Because normally when you log into a computer, you're kind of just there and you type in your username and password. But there are other ways to log in through a computer, and you don't have to necessarily be physically there. Oops. If it's running on my computer. No, it is not. But basically, from our scan a while ago, we did see that this port 5985 is running. It stands for WinRM or Windows Remote Management. but and it's used by administrator or server admins to sort of remotely administer and run commands on multiple systems. But in our case, especially with something built into accessible by Kali, there's a tool called Evil WinRM. This service, it says WSMan, but people usually just call it WinRM. There's a tool called Evil WinRM that you can use to attempt to log in remotely through this port. So if I look, the username for the hash is administrator. Password is this. And the IP address is this. So if I run this command, I'm actually able to log in to the computer remotely after stealing their, after essentially stealing their password for, by utilizing remote file inclusion. And it looks like I'm completely logged in and I can just run whatever I want. So that's yeah, that's this box. It's pretty cool. Does anyone have any questions on anything that I did or like maybe why I did certain things? Okay. But all right, well if no one has any questions then uh I will say this is actually isn't the only way to get in on the system because if you remember what I was saying earlier, while through remote file inclusion, we were able to crack a weak password, and then we were able to log in with that weak password. However, if they didn't have a weak password, the hash wouldn't have been crackable. But what we did have still is that we had code execution through remote file inclusion. Because with the way PHP works, PHP reads the PHP code on the web page or on the file that it's serving, and then it runs the code and then kind of shows the output on screen. In this case, the code is the function system, so it's running the command hostname on this machine, and uh, it shows the output over here. So it runs hostname and then it's gonna show the output. Does anybody have any idea how we could potentially leverage this as another way to get into the target?
I'm so sorry, man. I'm pretty sure you're in a room with complete noobs. I
It's
know I
all good.
speak for myself.
Now don't worry about it because what this is we essentially can run code on their computer just like really inefficiently because we sort of have to run one command at a time and then load the web page for the command to run. And that's not really optimal as an attacker, right? So if think of it like in a more like normal scenario is that if an attacker could run like one or two commands at a time on your host machine, what might they try to do with that, right? What an attacker could do with that is they can download malware and then have more control over your computer through malware. So Kali comes with this tool called MSF Venom that's basically built it's like open source malware, if that makes sense. Like this stuff can be used for malicious purposes, but it's also very well known, so it's not really too much of a danger. but here, I'll send the command. This is basically going to create a malicious file, right? That one run is going to let the attacker sort of control your computer. So to set this up, I'm going to run this command. Just gonna put that command up there and leave up my SMB server. And from the PHP code, I'm going to make it run command prompt, and I'm going to tell command prompt to run to access the SMB share again. And then I forgot why I called it shell. I called it shell.exe. I think I might have to put I think these things might be getting escaped, so I think I'm gonna put 2 of them just to be safe. So I'm going to access test.php and see if anything happens. And if it doesn't, then I might mess something up. So we'll see how that goes. Oh wait, I didn't put the right wait. Oh yeah, I put the wrong IP address. It's not gonna connect back to me. Basically, to keep it brief and simple, this creates a malicious executable that one run, it's gonna connect to an attacker machine based on these two parameters that you specify here. I specified the wrong value on one of them though, so now I completely screwed up, to say the least. So I'm gonna correct it, and hopefully it's gonna work this time. So I'm going to try this again. Uh, oops. Let me try it. Here we go. Now I should wait. What? Test PHP share test share test PHP. No such directory in HC. Wait, I don't even know what just happened. Now it's working. What? Okay, that's kind of weird. Whatever. A lot of things usually don't work on the first try, uh, or second or third, but it looks like the malware got ran on the system because I have a connection right here. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. But yeah, so even if I wasn't able to crack that password that I extracted by using a remote file inclusion through SMB, I was able to still use that remote file inclusion to run commands on the server machine which and the command I ran just sort of ran malware on the machine and now I'm in. It's pretty cool. But yeah, that's this thing. Does anybody have any questions on what I did or why I did it? Well, if there are no questions, I'll just cut the recording here. I mean, I know there's only 8 minutes left, but there's not too much we can do within that remaining bit of time. I'm just gonna cut it off right here. Oh, bye, Ashley. Okay, just cut the meeting off or recording.